Hello, welcome to my first recording and possibly the beginning of my podcast. I'm Monika and I am an EC at heart. You can find more about me on my website, monikaobermeyer.com, or you can find me on social media. I thought I'd do my first recording on a little story that I tell pretty much everyone I've ever trained or anyone who's been struggling with a difficult child. I tell the story not because I'm a bad educator, but because I want to be better. I think I'm pretty gentle on myself. I know that I've made mistakes in my work, and I will probably continue to make mistakes. I don't think anyone's perfect. But I'm also hard on myself too, because I think that there's always lessons to be learned in those mistakes to grow and to improve and to not let them happen again. So I'll kind of set the stage for you so you understand the situation. I was in school doing my diploma in early childhood education. So that was very early in my career. And I had a placement at a setting, and then I got a job at that setting. Mostly by luck, because the EC in the room left and they needed someone for only a couple months before the school year ended. But I was still a student. So instead, they made me what's called director approved early childhood educator. That means you're in education to become an educator, but they can't find anyone better when they need someone immediately, so you can be the EC in the room. So the room that I got was the only room in the school at the time. It was a before and after school program, and it wasn't a very large program. We didn't have a lot of children in the school who needed care, so we actually had all age groups in our program, in our room. That was everywhere from JK until about grade 4. I don't think we had anyone over grade 4. And it was myself and early childhood assistant in the room. So when I started working there was a little boy, and he was quiet, sweet, gentle boy. We only had him part-time, but he seemed like a very pleasant child. And then within a few weeks, maybe a month, I don't know how long it was, but enough time for me to notice that his behavior dramatically changed. He went from this very gentle child to a child who was more aggressive and defiant. I would see him purposely hurt other children. He would disobey the rules, definitely was pushing like all the limits that he could find. And it was all very intentional. It was all very different than he had been before, but it was glaring, like it was definitely happening. Something was going on, because every day that he was present at the program, I definitely had to fill out an accident report. And some days that would include multiple children injured, bloody noses, bruises, bites, hits, different things. So, in one aspect you can look and you can say, well, where was I? The truth is, ratios work really well when everyone is behaving and following the rules. But when they're not, 2 staff to 20 children, it's really not enough if you have one child who needs additional care. Now, that's what we have to work with. That's what we do. We do our best. But it's simply not enough hands in this situation. So as this was going on, I had started asking Dad many times, like, is anything going on? Is anything changing? I noticed a change in his behavior. We had another incident today. Overall, he was a great kid. Just something was different in his behavior. And Dad always said, no, nothing's going on. I don't know what's making him act like this. We're not seeing anything at home. We don't know what's going on. It's strange that it's happening in your program. So we just kept dealing with the behavior as best as we could. And one day when mom came to pick him up, she pulled the early childhood educator aside. Sorry, the early childhood assistant aside and spoke to her in private. Now, mom had known the assistant much longer because she had been with the program much longer than I did. They had a little talk, and the child and mom left. And later that day, when we had a chance, the assistant told me that the boy was actually being tested for leukemia. So he had been spending a lot of time in and out of the hospital. And obviously, the family was under a lot of stress, and nothing had been found yet. But there was a high suspicion that he probably had leukemia. So, obviously, after I heard, I had so much more empathy for this child. I was more patient. I was more able to adapt the program. I was able to give him more love and support. When he hurt other children, my approach was very different. It had changed because I now understood what was causing it. But the truth of the matter is, which I realized pretty much very quickly after I heard what happened, what was going on. The truth is I didn't actually need to know. I should have been more empathetic and supporting him all along. I think our training teaches us to find out what's going on in the child's home life, to inquire, to get information from parents. But it really didn't matter. I knew he changed. I knew something was going on that could have been enough, that should have been enough. And in terms of respecting his family, I did talk to Dad, and he had the opening to share, but maybe he wasn't ready to share. Maybe he wasn't ready to have one more person know. They had enough on their plate and enough of their own struggle to process what was going on with their child, to adapt their life to all these new changes that they had to go through. Their schedules were probably, being pushed a little further to their limits. It wasn't Dad's responsibility to keep me informed. My responsibility was to do the best I could for that child. And I think that child deserved my best. And so did that family. So because of this incident and my learning through it, pretty much at all workplaces that I've been, if I have a space to post something, there's one or two things I always post on my door that really stand out to me, just to help me remember this circumstance, this child, and then any child going forward that I could apply this learning to. And one of them is, sorry, I want to make sure I get it right. The kids that need the most love ask for it in the most unloving ways. And the second is, what we see as a failure to behave properly is actually a failure to communicate properly. So this boy was communicating. He was communicating in the only way he knew how. He was too consumed with what was going on and perhaps didn't have the language or the relationship with either of us, or for a variety of reasons, to come and tell us what was going on. But he was telling us, he was showing us, this wasn't his typical behavior. He was changing, and he was hurting, and he was going through something, and he was communicating through his behavior. And he needed support, and we just weren't listening to what he was telling us. And I think, as early childhood educators or teachers or anyone working with children, we have a lot of demands on us. It's very easy to get wrapped up in the day and the expectation on us and all the tasks and all the children and all the responsibilities and all the pieces of the job that we know we have to hit every day. We have a hard job. Most people don't work with that many children for that many hours. And we have to give ourselves some credit. But in that moment, I think, it wasn't a moment, it was this period of time. In that period of time, I think it was important that I would have stepped back and recognized and remembered why I do this job and what's the reason that I'm even in that room. And that is really to make a change and improve the lives of children. And perhaps if I didn't get snack out on time, or I didn't make sure every child, went outside that day, or that everyone's bags were in the right place, and all those little demands, that maybe I put out one last activity that was less messy because I didn't have the ability to watch that messy activity and support the children and give this child the one-on-one that he needed. But I needed to make time to give that child my empathy, my love, and my compassion. I needed to stop looking for answers and playing detective, because if I stopped just long enough to spend a little more time with him, to reflect on what was going on, I would have gotten to supporting him sooner. I would have found that, the time that you put in always pays back in so much multiples. We know that. We see that when we do put in that time with children one-on-one, that their behavior does change because they know they have someone there. They know they have someone that cares. And the children who don't need it in that very moment, they get it in other ways. So if you have to step away from that larger group to be with that one-on-one, it's totally worth it. And this story has stayed with me, and obviously it has improved my relationships with children. I do take that time. I will step away from the larger group for the one-on-one, but I still have to remind myself. I still have to think about it and make it a conscious decision, because we are busy. There's a lot going on. You step into any classroom, anyone who walks in can see that it is controlled chaos. And our children deserve us to really put the priorities where they need to be. And the priorities are the heart. It's really, are we giving that love? Are we giving that compassion? Are we making their needs number one? And really considering their hierarchy of needs. Feeling safe really has to come before are we putting out the most educational, developmentally appropriate activity. Because you cannot learn if you don't feel safe, if you don't feel like the people around you care about you. And I think that's what that boy taught me, is put that caring, that love, that safety, that the relationship between people first. And you can too. And that's it for me. So if you want to know more about me, come to my website. I said at the beginning, but my name's really hard to spell. So it's Monika Obermeyer. Everything's spelt weird. MONIKAOBERMEIER.com. And feel free to find me on social media. Thanks for listening. Bye.